All right. Okay, cool. Here we go. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us once again. Alex here, again, content director at the Festival of Enterprise, host of Screw It, Just Do It podcast, and I'm joined by Piers Linney. Piers, how you doing today?
I'm all right. I'll start meeting like this. It's like being a habit, isn't it? There's
It is.
behind you in a picture frame. Yeah,
I
I've been literally been. Oh, my phone's ringing. I've literally been here all day. I've moved it to probably 9 o'clock this morning, actually, on various calls. One of which was 4.5 hours.
What? Was that the...
On a video call, a board meeting.
Wow. That's tough. I thought mine were long.
And a 4.5 hour video call. You get the odd toilet cup of tea break. That's about it. I had two lords on it, so you've got to behave yourself.
You have. Lord Billamoria we had on last week, which was a really good talk. I guess his business has been really up and down this year, given being in the hospitality and the restaurant business.
Yeah, it must be really tough, actually, and they're small businesses. But he's also now president of the CBI as well, so he's quite a well, you know him quite well. He's quite an enthusiastic, passionate guy about.
He really is, yeah.
Small business, and we're talking about diversity in UK boardrooms and the whole thing, really.
Nice. And you've been on Breakfast TV already today as well?
I was on Breakfast TV this morning talking about trying to avoid talking about the government. I'm on the board of the government bank, so the chancellor's what he says, and that's it really. So I kind of talked more about just getting through the COVID and the pandemic. And what does it mean if you're a small business? And talking about it's about planning now, and it's always been very hard for the last 12 months. And I've got various businesses in different stages. It's very hard to plan because you just don't know. I mean, it's hard now planning Christmas because you don't know what to do. And it's like that in business. It's the same thing that you can't plan because you don't know where your cash flow looks like, whether you can even open your doors. Whereas now you can see a chink of light at the end of the tunnel. You don't quite know exactly where it is, but you can sort of see that in the distance. What that means is you can start to plan for, well, how do I get there and beyond that? Because the stats show that we're not going to be back to where we were last year until 2025.
Wow.
So coming out of recession to Q4 2022, I think they were saying. So it's not really about COVID anymore. What clearly is, but it's about that, and then trading through the recession. I know businesses that are doing very well. Depends what you're doing, isn't it?
It does indeed. And you could, if you need planning help, you can win a mentoring session with Piers, in fact, through having just registered for the Festival of Enterprise. So if you are here today, you've registered, we will be picking a winner for that. You also got 3 modules. I think it was 3, wasn't it, Piers? 3 free modules of your course, Startup, Scale Up.
I made a course to try and scale up my ability to give this kind of advice. We're giving away, it's not modules, we're giving away some selected lessons from it.
Okay, yeah.
You get the feel for it if it's for you, and then if it is, then you can buy the whole course for a big discount.
Yeah, we've got it exclusive on here, folks. Joining us down under £200, where it was £600. So we'll post up the links for that for you. I think your website is obviously going to have the startup course on there.
So Scale Up. We've done it with Festival Startup. So scaleup.yourstartup.co.uk.
Yeah, that's the one we posted.
Now I think it is, and it's 10.5 hours of me like this talking to you. If that doesn't sound like something you can put up with, then it's not for you. It's like having 200 coffees with me. So it started off as I thought I keep getting asked the same questions. I need to put it into a video, and that turned into a course, and it nearly killed me making it. You're doing it, aren't you? If anyone ever says to you, "I'll make an online course, throw it on the internet, and you make money out of it," it's not as simple as that. It nearly killed me. So I do charge for it, but I think it's one of those things where it's worth infinitely what you might have to pay for it in terms of the ability to avoid mistakes. Access advice is hard to get. And I've been a lawyer, an advisor, a banker, sat on all sides of the table, really. It's about sharing that.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know this as well as I do. There's that many snake oil salesmen out there saying that they've created, multiple 8-figure businesses and are selling a course on business and how to start a business, but have actually, scrabbling together and borrowing money off people left, right, and
That really
centre.
annoyed me actually. When I was doing the research, there's a lot of that, and there's a lot of billionaire mindset. And if you ask the universe, you'll get a prize.
Yeah,
That kind of thing. Mine's not like that. Mine's practical. It's like, how do accounts work, and what's the difference between income tax and capital gains tax, and what's branding, and what's the difference in a partnership and a limited company. It's all these questions that you sometimes you start or build a business, you think, I wish I could ask somebody about that. And if someone said to you, "Oh, I know Piers, he'll have a call with you for half an hour," I'll give him a
yeah,
bell. And it's that conversation.
yeah.
That's not all the answers, but it'll signpost you. Oh, right, okay, now I begin to understand it. And then when you go and look at what's out there, because there's a lot of information out there, you actually know what's relevant, and when someone is trying to pull the wool over your eyes, because there's a lot of nonsense out there.
But also, from your point of view, that kind of plays on the name. It enables you to scale up what you do, because I don't know if you still get this. Like, and I know exactly what it's like, having just put together a course myself on podcasting. It literally nearly killed me. I don't think I've ever been so stressed doing that and doing everything else in life as well. Filming the videos, etc., all the different lessons. But I still get people like sending a DM on Facebook or WhatsApp saying, "Can I just grab a call with you? It'll only take 10 minutes." And of course, it's never 10 minutes, because you actually need to find out a little bit more the context of their question. And I'm assuming you still get that.
I get that scale though. So imagine,
Yeah,
I'm too nicer, but I sort of can't help myself. So I want to sort of help people where I can. But you get into conversation on email or LinkedIn or wherever it is, and like you say, you need, well, tell me a bit more about it, and then you get this to and fro, which is fine. But times that by 10, there aren't enough hours in the day,
yeah,
and especially when people are asking you essentially the same question. And sometimes, if you're experienced, and the point is this: is serial entrepreneurs exist because they've done it before, and they're not particularly anything more clever than anyone else. They've just made all the mistakes already. So when I come to start a business now, I still make mistakes, but you don't make all the mistakes that you made in the first 5 or 10. And that's what it's about, really. It's about trying to avoid you falling into potholes. And also, not all of us have. I think when I was growing up, I didn't have access to people that understood the kind of business I wanted to be in, or raise money, or I've done a crowdfunding, and I've just done one with my bike company. So now it's ability to reach out and have that conversation. And if you've got it, good for you. If you don't have access to that kind of conversation, or people, or people that kind of experience or guidance or mentors or whatever you want to call them, then that's what it's about. But it's practical, no nonsense. Me just talking to you, really. And then people do still then reach out. But what you'll find is that every question you're facing, you think, oh, how the hell is this? How am I going to get over this? They've all been answered. It's just a
yeah.
question of finding the right people to provide you with, an answer, but one that's particularly relevant to you. So I've tried to keep it quite broad.
Yeah. And this is your opportunity today, folks, as well, whilst we're on here with Piers, to post up your questions. So feel free to do that. Question had, and it kind of comes back to what you said earlier with regards to creating a brand, creating a business. Where do you see the difference between creating a business and creating a brand? What is the difference for those people starting out?
That's changed a lot over the years. So I'm actually doing it now. If people think that I should have sit in my flipping video conferencing bubble, and I've got a private jet outside a helicopter. I haven't. And I would never want one either, quite frank. So I'm still in the game. I've just helped. Help. I'm a co-founder, chairman of Atherton Bikes as a company. We just raised £1.5 million on Crowdcube.
So 1.5 in the end.
Yeah, we got to 1.5. Yeah, we blew through that in about 17 days. But anyway, to raise 600.
Yeah.
Now, that's partly me, obviously, but it's mostly to do with the fact the Athertons are the world champions and they've got a real following. So
Yeah.
but we spent a lot of time talking to angel investors and then the crowd, and some of the crowd investors as well. But I'm starting a new business now, hopefully, which is about supporting small businesses, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, in the future. And I'm going through this process. So I actually said to myself, right, Piers, don't just talk the talk, walk it. So I kind of looked at my course, right, let's do the research. So I've got that's here actually. That's 100 pages of research, physical research in a document. So I did my research, and then I talked to lots of people. And my first idea I had, because I've always been quite, I think I know what I'm doing, let's do this. And I kind of talked to a lot of people. I'm thinking about doing this. I said, well, don't do that. You probably want to do this. And I said, okay, let's do that. and it's kind of evolved with all this input.
Mm-hmm.
It's become a stronger proposition. And then going back to your question, is I'm now talking about the brand. So I've kind of got a name, but is that the right name? And what's become more interesting is some friends of mine I've worked with for years, they're called Something More Near. They've developed probably 3 brands with me, including Atherton Bites. Atherton's had a name, Atherton, that's their name, but they created the kind of the brand around that. And we're talking about technology now, and this is like a sort of a user interface with very sort of app-based. And when I talk to them now, it used to be, the brand. You come up with a brand and a logo and a book and a tone of voice and who is that? Who is this person? All this kind of stuff. The branding onion or the branding pillars. There's all kinds of ways of coming up with a brand. But increasingly now, you talk to them, they're saying, well, actually, the UX, the user experience, the user interface is critically important. And in some ways, that will inform you of what your brand probably needs to look and sound like. So I think branding, and that these guys are experts. I'm just telling you what I've heard from them. I'm not telling you I'm an expert. It's evolving. What it isn't is coming up with a logo.
Yeah.
That's not a brand. That's a logo. That's something you stick on your t-shirt, your baseball cap, 2D device. A brand is it's if your business was a person, who are they? What do they like? What don't they like? How do they speak to people? How do they react? How do they, what's the culture? Because you put 2 people in a room, you have a culture. And if you get your business culture wrong at the end, which will inevitably inform your brand, it's very, very hard to change it. So I'm actually learning, going into, I've done tech before. A lot of my tech's been kind of enterprise tech. This is sort of infrastructure with a very intelligent sort of platform with an app. So I'm learning really what branding in this century looks like. So I've done it in the last century.
And for example, like when the Athertons approached you, and they obviously must have known that you were keen mountain biker yourself, what kind of business acumen did they have, or were they very much, we are just like the brand ambassadors, so to speak, but we've got these ideas as well?
That's a good question. They're quite an interesting case study. So, so you had I didn't know the Atherton. So G, I think you pinged me on Instagram or something. And I was like, okay, why is G Atherton messaging me? He goes, you want to have come and meet up? I want to talk to you about a business. Okay, fair enough. So he met at my lawyer's office in Manchester. And you had the Athertons there who are, world champs. They are elite athletes. You've got G, who's won the World Cup twice, I think. Rachel's won it 6 times. She's got Sports Personality of the Year. You've got brother Dan Atherton, who's raced as well, never won the World Championship, but he's won races. But he's one of the sort of leading trail builders in the world. They're all sponsored by Red Bull. So they understand the racing on the edge. They've been building a brand for 15 years. They're very well known. If you know anything about mountain bikes, you know the name.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had a chap called Dan, who's a CEO, who's worked with them for 15 years. He knew them very, very well, but he ran the business side of them. He was the Atherton Racing. So they're the athletes, and he's the guy to make sure that the sponsorship, the team, it all works. And then they spotted some other guys who weirdly I'd talked to probably a year before on Twitter, who were engineers, techies really, aerospace material scientists and engineers. Who come up with a way of building mountain bikes. What they do is, in a bike, you've got the joints. They used to be welded the tubes together. They 3D print the joints in a titanium. So that's a strong bit. And the light bit, the tubes. So they're quite standard carbon fiber circular tubes. And they print these things in a looks like a washing machine, quite literally. And then they put these tubes in, then you get a frame, and you build a bike. And they saw the technology. Normally with bikes, you have to go to Taiwan. It's a 2-year cycle to get a bike built. This way, you can change this design very, very quickly. We changed the whole design, printed a bike, built it, got it out to G in 3 days. That takes 2 years normally.
That's insane.
They saw the tech. You've got the brand, but they wanted someone to kind of help them glue it together. So I was okay, let's kick the tires, see if we could all work together, put a structure together, put a brand together, put a business plan together, a product strategy, a financial model, a financing plan, and then we kind of bootstrapped it for sort of 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
We raised about £70,000 from some investors. We kind of bootstrapped it. No one got paid for 2 years. We just worked on it. We had the products. And then that is a great example of bringing together co-founders that on their own probably wouldn't have worked.
Yeah.
I could start by a company. The Africans probably could have done, but probably I probably helped them along the way. But the technology probably more than me, to be quite frank. So the three groups have come up with this fantastic business that has got a great future.
Mm.
And that's sometimes what you need to do. You need founders, co-founders. You've got to fill your skill gaps. In my business now, I'm very good at I understand the technology enough to be dangerous, to know when someone's pulling the wool over my eyes. But I can't be the CTO. So I've had to reach out and find some people that buy into my vision, who are willing to, join the team, for as long as interim or maybe even permanently, to provide me that support. Otherwise, I can't progress it. So a
Yeah.
lot of people, they sit there sort of struggling about, how do I do this? You have to reach out. It's not always a co-founder, but it's about finding people that are buying into what you're trying to do and get them involved.
How early would you say people need to do that when they're starting a business? Because quite often, whether it's say it used to be the back of a fag packet, but I don't know how many people, I don't even know anyone who smokes anymore, back of a napkin where they write down the business idea and then they decide to action it, or they've taken out a startup loan and they've started a business that way. How early on in their journey? I know it's a really general question.
Very general, yes. It depends on what you're doing, your experience. But I think typically, if you try to be general about it, 'cause it's quite a broad question, you probably need to start asking people probably before you think you need to ask people.
Mm.
Well, like, of course, people in the last 2 weeks, one lady, she's trying to build a business making hair care. She's got an autistic son. She's struggling, juggling life and work and the business. You speak to some other people that are experts in what they do. One guy was a very senior marketeer at Nike. Now he's setting up a business, and they've got different requirements in terms of support, but they've both got it. And I think in both cases, you'll find that I met this lady actually on a call like this. It was a group call, and I gave her some advice, and I'm going to get on the phone with her in next week, I think it is. And then the other chap, he reached out to someone that I know, who then reached out to me. But even he's, if you read his CV, you think, well, why does someone like that need help? They can hire people, but they all do. And it's recognizing what skills you need, what support you need very early, and trying to fill those gaps there where you can. And it could be reading a book,
Yeah.
could be on the internet, but usually it's reach. Entrepreneurs are better, in my personal opinion, taking advice from other entrepreneurs because it's more relevant, there's more context, and they understand where
Yeah.
and they've been through it.
Well, Richard Bearman, funny enough, we just had on MD of Startup Loans, which again, you probably might trying to think of the relationship between them and the British Business Bank these days, because it's changed, but it's been brought within the British Business Bank, isn't it?
Well, they've kind of changed the brand, really. It's been absorbed to get acquired. So
That's the word. Yeah.
It's been integrated in terms of operationally, but they still had the green Startup Loans branding and the Business Bank, like the UK, the sort of Union Jack looking design. So they kind of just merged those two together now.
Yeah, and he was saying, we're talking about the mentoring side of things, and he was saying what he'd like to develop more is the fact that, say, now it's 7, 8, 9 years since the scheme started. I've lost count, but getting some of those alumni, I call them, who've come through to actually help with the advice with people, because people are going to respect that they've come through the same system. And you've got the likes of like we know Jamal Easel from Change Please, who's now probably got, I don't know, multiple 7-figure business.
I forget he came through there sometimes. So I forget that. But so what's the thing about Startup Loans is I'm a huge fan of Startup Loans, because if you need that, if you don't have access to savings or family or friends or that 1, 2, 5, 20,000 pound you start a company, then Startup Loans is a real option for you. If you've got your credits not particularly great, then they'll overlook that. In fact, as long as they understand your plan, and then also you have to create a plan. And as you know, Alex, you know more about it than I do. They have business advisors to help you go through that process, and that's actually really important, because you might find out very quickly that your plan doesn't hold water, or you need to change things quite dramatically to make it work. So they make you kick the tires and make sure that when you do receive that check, then your chance of success are maximised. And what amazes me, how many companies I meet and I sort of say to them, "Well, how did you get started?" And they go, "Startup Loans."
Yeah.
It's thousands of them, and you're right. The alumni, and I'm a big believer again, is do well. So Ken Alyssa, my old chairman, I can't call him all, my former chairman, he's got a coat of arms, and it says on it, do well, do good. So my view is, I totally agree with that. If you've been through that process and you've learned something and you do okay now, you should put something back. But I guess for a startup learns company, it's about how do they productize that, because it's quite a big organization.
It is. I had another one crop up the other day, which was Double Dutch Drinks, which are like two Dutch twins, Raisa and Joyce, with different flavored tonic waters, who are doing really well. And I forgot they started with startup loans, and I just saw them post up on LinkedIn that I don't know what the percentage is, but Heineken, ABV, whatever the full name of the company is taken a chunk of investment in that business as well. So there's all sorts of really interesting stories of businesses that start that way. And you think, well, two Dutch sisters, two twins, happen to be very good looking as well, with a very sexy looking brand, and it's been acquired by massive Dutch conglomerates. Scaling opportunities are going to be pretty interesting for them, I'd imagine.
And has it been this week? I know it's been going on, Festival of Start. It's been on for over a week now, hasn't it? So
Yeah.
People there at all stages. And I think that one of the things that's always missed is, that people don't start startups. They start a business that they want to grow. So you only want to be a startup a very short amount of time. And I guess one thing that's often missed, but you kind of captured in these events, is that kind of scale up as well. And I was on the Scale Up Institute. The new report was out last week, I think it was. Looking at that in terms of, even despite there's been a slowdown in growth, but the entrepreneurial ambition, the determination to build businesses and grow businesses, start businesses in the UK, is absolutely, it hasn't, it's been dented, but it hasn't. I think it's, if you look, there's more companies being started. Was it this year? You know better than I do.
Yeah, that's right.
So how many will survive? I don't know, but I think it's probably a function of people realizing that there aren't jobs for life anymore.
Yeah, no, that's something that both independently on separate webinars, both Stuart Chapman, founder of Draper Esprit Venture Capital, and the Dragon's Den director Stepan Galiev, and then I think it was Richard, Startup Loans, all said the quantity has greatly increased, but equally the quality seems a lot better than in previous years. And something Richard mentioned, which I thought was interesting as well, was it's something you said there, that he thought, one of the qualities, those businesses that have succeeded, that haven't been, those ones that fail in the first 5 years, given how long Startup Loans have been going, have been those that actually think big from the outset. They're not thinking, I'm starting a startup. It's like exactly what you said. I'm starting a business, and this is where I want to be in 5 years or 10 years or however long.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the big success stories, it's quite funny. You look at people say about Amazon. I love the Amazon story. People say, he's one of those people where, he was a hedge fund quant. He started a book company because he realized that it was a very simple, fungible product. There were lots of them, huge amount of choice, loads of languages. They didn't break in the post. That was logic. And he had a vision to scale up. I told people all the time, oh yeah, he had a bookshop and look what he's done with it. He had Amazon in his mind 20 years ago. Tell me what he's done.
Yeah.
But it's horses for course, isn't it? So you shouldn't get lost in the I've got to create the next Airbnb or nothing. Most small businesses, at the end of the day, they're reasonably lifestyle based. You can't put a bit of paper between someone's business and their private life. Your dividend is your income. You're your own boss. You manage your own diary. Thank you very much. Everyone doesn't need all the risk of trying to go large and raising money and having other people involved in your business. Now, if you realize that business you've got has the potential to grow, then it's a conversation about how do you grow it and should you grow it, and how do you go about it, and how do you finance it. But you shouldn't never feel, if you're in these events, that I don't want to become a billionaire or have a company with 50 million in revenue. I know people who've got companies, and it might sound like a big number to you. They might have 1 million in revenue. Their costs are 200 grand, maybe 300. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
They've got 400 grand a year coming after tax.
I know. And I was interested when I was chatting to Rowena Bird from Lush, which again, I didn't know it was a $1 billion business. She said I prefer saying dollar because it's a billion. We say it in pounds. It's clearly not yet. But
Yeah.
she's saying they borrowed some money initially when they started it up, but they paid it back really quickly, and they've never had to actually get investment since. Which
Well, that's one of the businesses, isn't it, where it's the different approach to growth, isn't it? So you've got the Bezos approach, if you look at it, which was, yes, he's grown an enormous business, but he's grown 20-30% a year. I'm ignoring the AWS, so the hosting business now, slightly different.
Yeah.
But in terms of the retail business, that's been growing at 20% a year for 25 years.
Yeah,
And if you know anything about compound interest, that's amazing. So if you can build a business like that, I think Lush has been a bit like that. I mean, retail normally, you get your model right, you know who your customers are, you know where they work, the shops, and that's where you see these chains suddenly roll out. Sometimes they roll out too quickly, or they roll out at the wrong time in terms of the recession or pandemic, and they get into trouble. But that's how these things grow. You know, tech's a bit different, where you can experience exponential growth, but you might need £400 million to actually fund that. And then you that game where I see lots of companies where it's musical chairs. You know, if the music stops, and I've been there myself, to be quite frank. The music stops. There's no one else to write the next check. It's sort of game over. So courses, you want to build a business in a way that works for you, not what everyone's telling you to do.
Did you see? I thought of you the other day actually when from that event we did in Manchester with Jamal Easel, and we had Jamie and Ed there from Candy Kittens, and I saw that they posted up with like getting a deal with Walmart, like 4,000 Walmart stores in America, and I thought, and I remember Ed jumping on a plane to Virgin, which I think they helped him out with a flight, and that was probably, I don't know, 2.5 years ago, and he said literally checked in the suitcase full of packets of sweets, and that was literally my pitch to go to the trade conference, and hard work pays off and all the rest of it. So,
well, they found a niche there. I mean, I remember that I've had the sweets. I try and avoid sweets, but they found a real smart. It's not even a niche, is it? Everyone loves sweets. The way they went about it, they thought about it, and those guys, let's face it, they didn't come from backgrounds where they probably needed a lot of money. But they've totally built a business. They know the customer, they've got the product, they've scaled it up, and they've done it.
Yeah. And now they're pimping Jamie out on Strictly, which always helps when you go face of the brand.
Yeah. I had a chat about that once, but I ran a mile from that. I wouldn't look.
Did you really? I bet you get offered all sorts of things.
I'm not great in tight lycra with sequins, I don't think. We shall see.
Priceless. They might come back with another offer now,
Yeah, we'll see.
Got loads of questions coming in, so look, I'll shut up for a change. Samantha at findingstartups.com asks 2 questions, which is a bit greedy, Samantha, but hey, let's go for it. Number 1, what sort of entrepreneurial support do you see missing in emerging markets? And 2, what sort of peer-to-peer networks for entrepreneurs would you recommend?
By emerging markets, do you mean like Africa? Well, it's not an emerging market. But
that's what I thought, yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm an expert in emerging markets overseas, to be honest with you. So ask the question again. Do the second one. I'll do the second bit.
Yeah, second one. What sort of peer-to-peer networks for entrepreneurs would you recommend?
So there's, I mean, there are literally hundreds of them. There's national ones. There's ones you can pay to join. Enterprise Nation, for example, like communities. There's local groups. There's local organised groups like Chambers of Commerce, even that kind of group, all the way down to very small groups on Facebook that are related to a particular niche type of maker, for example. So there's lots of them. It's a question of, a bit like we talked about the content that's out there on the internet. It's choosing things quite carefully, because there's a lot of nonsense out there. There's a lot of people that will tell you that if you spend, is it £997? There's 7, isn't there? All these courses.
Yeah.
You spend this much money, you'll be guaranteed success. It's just nonsense, Anyone that's selling you a course or access to some group because they can guarantee you've got a system to be successful, if they were that good, they would not be selling you a course. That's me. I'm apart from me, obviously. I'll say that all back.
Disclaimer.
But their core business wouldn't be flogging you a system. Now,
Mm.
go back to the question though. There are lots of groups, and I think what you have to do is, annoy me, it can be quite time consuming, but try them, and you've got to kiss a few frogs
Yeah.
and get involved and just see if they're right for you. But a lot of these things can be talking shops, and you haven't got time for that. You might have some time for talking shop. You need someone to sort of you're a bit lonely at home because you're locked down. But generally speaking, business is about execution. It's about having a plan. Ideas are cheap, as they say, but it's about execution. So it's about finding people, groups, know-how that actually help you get from A to B. So one thing I talk about in my course, and this is what Sir Ken always said to me as well, is got to know your point A and you've got to know your point B. And if you're pretty clear on point B, point B might move, it might meander around a bit, but there's kind of a, I'm trying to get my hands on the screen here, but as long as you know roughly where it is. So he used to say, if you're in London, you want to get to New York, you might end up going via Iceland and Greenland and Canada, and you might land in New York. You might end up going via flipping Portugal, the Azores, and land in New Jersey. New Jersey's all right, you'll take that. So the way you get there might be quite convoluted, but you need to have a vision on where point B is, because what that means is, the point I'm getting to, is what you need to extract from these groups. If a decision or some advice doesn't move you closer from point A to point B, then you're sort of wasting your time. Ignore it or don't take that advice.
Yeah. Yeah, she's just put it in the chat. She's put Africa for the emerging, more remote regions.
I don't know if I'm not going to pretend to talk about stuff I'm not an expert in.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks, Samantha.
Sorry, my only point on that, I'm not an expert, is this. I've been approached quite a lot about these things, you can imagine. If you are going to go and work in the overseas market, never mind the emerging market, especially the emerging market, you need to have local people with local relationships who speak the language, they have the network, they have the contacts, and you need boots on the ground that you trust. Yeah. Otherwise, you're going to lose your shirt. And I'm not saying anything about Africa, you will lose your shirt in America. So boots on the ground, someone you can trust, understands the landscape.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I do. I think you might have done one of those with us up in Manchester, Piers, when we're doing British American business. So, like with the Manchester Chamber, and it's those businesses in Britain who are looking to do business in America and vice versa. And like you say, the success stories that we always do, like a chat, and somebody who's been there and done it is literally having those boots on the ground and someone who's been there and done it, because otherwise, country the size of America is just, where do you start?
You look at American politics, and you can get a sense from that it's a very different country depending on where you are within the country. Sort of 50 mini countries almost, different laws, different tax structures, different state regulations, they're quite different culturally depending where you are in the US. But there are so many UK companies that, the dead bodies, corpses of them, washed up on the proverbial beaches of North America. Land there because they all speak English and make some money. It doesn't work like that. You need to think about it really carefully.
Yeah, can be absolutely fraught. I used to do a lot of that with Virgin Atlantic Delta guys. So, Jonathan Nowak, head of user acquisition at CLYX. Do you have any advice about how to shape B2B content? We are a consumer-facing app, but I'm trying to engage commercial partners with content on LinkedIn, and the content pillars all seem to be the same.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'll try and do the same thing sometimes. So, B2B is, if you come from B2C, let's start again. So I think a lot of people, they're in B2C. I'm not saying this is what you're trying to do. You have asked a question there. And you think, B2C is quite hard. There's a big marketing spend. Let's go B2B, it's easier. B2B is not easier. So the thing about B2B is whether you're on LinkedIn, whether you're sending somebody around in a car when you can to sell someone, face to face, is that people in business will tend to ask you a lot more difficult questions than your average consumer hunter. Because you can sell them on a dream and a lifestyle and an advert on Instagram that they can click for. The other day I clicked an email 4 times. I had a £97,000 Tesla in a shopping basket. I mean that's B2B. That doesn't happen in B2B because someone there, it's either their business, their livelihood, or there's someone in that business, if it's a bigger one, their job is to kick the tires and manage suppliers. So going back to content, you've got to work out very, very clearly in the B2B scenario, who is it you're trying to communicate with? Because, when you're trying to sell into a business, it can often be a matrix in terms of decision making. You might want to sell to, marketing, but then the commercial or the CFO needs to understand it. Eventually the CEO needs to sign it off. So you need to work out is who is it you need to communicate with, and therefore is your content relevant to them? There's no point trying to make some content that's super relevant to a person you think you're selling to, if actually it's the commercial or CFO that's making all decisions, or the boss or the partner or the CEO. So work out who your target customer is, that persona, and try and make content that's relevant to them. And then a lot of it's out there on the internet, but it is true. Really. It's about consistency, and it's about volume, and it's about having the right messaging, and about being determined. And eventually, and there's a science to it as well in terms of getting in front of people, and you can apply a budget to it as well to make sure that the right person is seeing the right advertising. But I think that LinkedIn is one of the. I don't really do Facebook. I should do. I need to get back. I need to get on that horse. But I don't really do. I tend to I do a bit on Twitter. It's more me shouting at Donald Trump normally. And then you've got LinkedIn, quite active on. YouTube, I'm sort of building that. I've been testing playing YouTube, try and work it out. But that consistency, if you look at people who are successful in social media, they're very clear on what they are, what the brand is, what the message is, and it's consistent quality volume, targeted at the right people. And just don't give up. It might take you a year actually to get any traction, but just keep going with it. And video, sorry, that's the other secret. And all the algorithms now for video.
Yeah, and live is heavily rewarded
live
as well, isn't
it? Yeah. I'm used to live. I always got plans to do live. I've got my LinkedIn Live account. I should do it. Never get around to doing it.
Yeah, you should if you've got one of them. They're a rarity being given a LinkedIn Live account in this country. Yeah.
Well, I've started a new business. It's going to be quite focused on small businesses. So I think what I've been trying to do really is understand it myself. When I need to scale it up, I want to communicate with people who are watching this, listening to this. Then that's what I need to do as well.
Yeah, and also, Jonathan, I always think that personally, because I'm kind of going through this as well, is actually, whose content do you like and how successful is it? What kind of engagement are they getting with the content they're putting out on LinkedIn? How many shares, how many likes, how many comments are they getting in there? And model that. I'm not saying copy that, but all the people you follow on there, see what's successful, what isn't, and what resonates with you, and can you model that for your particular proposition that you're trying to engage your these commercial partners with as well.
It depends how many there are as well, because I think that in consumer, then it makes sense to be digital, advertising, targeting specifically, on Facebook or on other platforms, Instagram. If it's B2B and your universe of potential customers or people you want to communicate with isn't that big, you can actually potentially go and see them all. You can actually write to them all, send them something physical. I think in B2B sometimes, I used to remember where, this is probably 2-3 years ago now, I'd be in my office and someone would send me like a little sort of gizmo or toy. It was a gimmick, it was a marketing gimmick. It was, oh my God, it's real, and it came in the post.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow, it's not some email that's fighting to get through your spam filter. I think in B2B, people tend to be, you can be very relationship driven. So think about that. How do you get hold of those individuals and build a relationship personally, as opposed to hoping they listen to your podcast or watch your YouTube video? And the last point I make is look at it as integrated marketing. So integrated marketing is you don't put an advert on a bus stop and walk away and hope somebody sees it. You have an advert on a bus stop in the old days. You have a radio. You have a TV ad. And now you think about, yes, do you go on YouTube, LinkedIn? Do you write blogs? Do you have a podcast? Do you have the time to do all of that? And I was just saying, what do you like and what are you actually good at?
Yep. He's followed up, Jonathan's followed up with Piers. What do you think about Gary Vee? How long have you got?
Two minds about Gary Vee. So I think a lot of what he says in terms of, a lot of what he says Gary Vee, he says the same thing over and over again.
Correct.
I kind of tuned out, to be quite frank.
Yeah.
I've said it all a million times. But the point about quality, consistency, volume, I think is correct. But I think that you have to be a bit smarter than kind of just relying on one or two of these sort of channels, because Gary, I don't know Gary Vee, but Gary Vee's business is digital marketing. So of course he's going to big up digital
Yeah.
marketing. That's what we all do. You all talk about and big up the stuff that is important to you and helps pay the bills. Um, but again, I think Gary Vee is one of the better ones actually. There's a lot of them that are the millionaire mindset, ask the universe. He doesn't do that.
Mm.
So, and I've read I've listened to his books. So, there's something that I wouldn't say life changing, but there's definitely something in there because let's face it, he's been very successful.
He has. I don't know, Jonathan, if you caught my interview with Brendan Kane. Is a good one worth checking out. That we spoke to from LA a couple of nights ago. He built up the social media platforms for Rihanna, for Taylor Swift, or these guys in the music industry. And the content is not dissimilar to Gary Vee in the messaging, but I actually prefer his less small, shouty man approach.
Also, Gary Vee is one of those people where it's like, oh, do you like Gary Vee? Gary Vee's been doing it for 20 years.
Yeah.
I'm not exaggerating. 15?
Mm.
He was making YouTube videos for his wine company when
That's right.
Probably only 7 people on YouTube.
Yeah.
It's when YouTube literally dropped, he was putting out content. So he's learned the old-fashioned way.
Mm. Here's a big different question. I think it was Nigel Austin from Outlook, from Cloverleaf Advisory says, Piers, how do you sort out an equity arrangement in the cycle situation you described right at the start? Do you agree how much sweat equity you will put in for those 2 years and this translates into shares, etc.?
That's a very good question. Yeah. So when you're starting on a business, my advice is, and I've mentioned in my course as well, is you've got to sort out the equity pretty early on. Now, it was reasonably straightforward in Athens. If you look at the equity, the share capital structure, you can see it obviously. It's all quite similar. So we all started off in a sort of a similar place. It was about 10 of us actually. It's about 9 of us, so sort of 10% each roughly, and then some other people got smaller shareholdings. And that's kind of how we started out. Now, over time, it's changed slightly because somebody wanted to sell some shares, somebody bought some of their shares, somebody's not committing as much time, so we sort of changed their shareholding. So it's changed slightly, and the weighting went more to the people who are the Atherton, the people running the business. But broadly speaking, we kind of all started as really equal co-founders. Now, that's not a good example. And a better example is where there's 1 or 2 of you thinking of starting a business. One of you is left your job and is spending your savings starting it. The other person hasn't left their job. Now, the question then you've got to ask yourself is, well, when you start this business, who do you really need and who's taking the most risk? So if you're very similar, you're both from marketing background, you both got marketing jobs, and one of you's left and one hasn't, and who's taking the most risk? Probably the person that's left their job, depending whether they might be minted, but it's quite different. They've got a trust fund, so that changes that dynamic as well. If one of you is developing an app and one of you is super technical, that's come up with this crazy new algorithm that's going to change the world, but they can't afford to leave their job yet, you're willing to help move the business along so they can, then yes, they're staying in their job, but they're taking. But you need that know-how. So you might not be equal partners. So each case is very specific, but you have to sit down and work out very early on what that split's going to look like. Because what you can't do is say, "Oh, don't worry, say there's four of you, we'll work it out." And you go down the road, and then you sit in front of somebody who wants to invest one day, or you get your first customer, and you think, "Well, hang on a minute, I've got to form a company now," because you will all fall out. I'll tell you right now, unless it's sorted out. Now, the other point is when you start a company, it's very easy to say, right, there's 2 of us, we need help. So you go and get your next door neighbour because they've just been made redundant, maybe a bit about marketing. You get your dad's friends, uncle's dog walker, next door neighbour who knows a bit about technology because he used to work for a startup. and you suddenly got this ragtag group of people who are helping you. It's good, and then they start saying, "We can't afford to pay me. Why am I doing it?" Or give you some shares, some options.
Mm-hmm.
And the worst thing is you actually do, and you have no structure to take them back if they leave. There's no good leaver, bad leaver. There's no vesting in the options. The options don't lapse if they leave. There's no structure to claw the equity back when people leave. Because in many companies it grows, you'll find that there's a revolving door of people. You'll find that your management team, if your company goes from being tiny to quite big, millions of revenue, you'll find that your management team, your team, some will evolve with it, some won't. You have to part company and bring in people that have the ability to grow the business. And what happens then? Do they go with the shares? Do they leave with the shares? So structure equity, once you get outside the founding equity, even then, if your co-founder, God forbid, falls under a bus, what happens?
Mm.
If your co-founder has some, I'm going through this now, my business, we're going through the legals, you've got some veto right or consent right or the right to appoint a director, and they get divorced or die or whatever,
Mm.
what happens? Where did those rights go, and who gets the shares? You should be able to buy them back. If they commit fraud against the business and they leave because they've done a runner, do they go with the shares? So you've got to think about this stuff really carefully. But once you get outside the founders and you're happy with that structure, then structure equity to people that join the business, and very, very, very carefully. Even if someone comes to you and they've been, there's some big wig from some company with an amazing CV, and I always mention this point. It's from the book by Ben Horowitz, who was one of the founders of Andreessen Horowitz, one of the big, most successful investors in the West Coast. And he wrote a book called A Hard Thing About Hard Things. And he says, when someone comes to you and says, "I want 10% of your company because I was the CEO of this big company," A, they're joining you for a reason. Your startup. That's one. Remember, you offering them some value, otherwise they wouldn't be talking to you. Secondly, they can leave. You can't.
Mm-hmm.
That. So
Yeah.
that's my rant on equity.
That was a good one. Okay, so keep the questions coming. Tom, who's a software engineer from First Principles, asks, what are your thoughts on software companies who do not use the software as a service model, such as web extensions and apps? Any other thoughts on different revenue models, please?
Well, I guess the technology choice depends on what it needs to do, and so I mean, I was talking to the guys a while ago. I did a podcast on NatWest, didn't I? And one of the guys came on was Pouch. I think they sold it to Express Group or something like that. And they were the ones where they put the voucher codes into your shopping basket. So they didn't need to have some big sort of cloud-based back end. They basically ran on, I think it works in one browser, I think. Or they had some JavaScript, which was running, and it could recognize it. It then called, and then it would sort of place that voucher code in your shopping basket and save you some money. It's quite light. There are other applications, like perhaps one I'm building, which, yes, there'll be a nice, hopefully a nice, banking is a good example. There's a nice front end, but actually the back end is incredibly complex and also regulated. So it depends really on what you're trying to do. I think that the key with technology is to try and work out what are you trying to do for your customer, and then work out how you actually go about doing it. Too many people start with technology, but I get it all the time actually. I want to build a business with an app.
Yeah.
What app should I build? I'm like, what are you talking about? Forget the app. Go and work out what problem you want to solve, or who your customer is, and how you can add value to their life, so they're willing to pay for you, B2B or B2C, and then work out how you're actually going to deliver that good or service. Don't start with the technology.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. And for you, again, when you did that podcast series with NatWest, you interviewed a number of successful entrepreneurs. You obviously met a whole bunch of them on when you were an investor in Dragon's Den and since. For you, what kind of characteristics, is a question we've got, make for a successful founder?
I don't know. I think there's so many people say there's so many things you see on the internet that are all the same sort of thing. I think the founders are a very diverse bunch of people. I think that they are people who are determined. Sometimes they're too determined. I've been there where you won't listen to anyone else. So you've got to be determined, but increasingly in this world, be willing to listen. I think that founders are people that are obviously innately willing to take risk. That's the big one. Now, when I was training as a lawyer, I'm a venture capital lawyer, believe it or not. So I'm a venture capital lawyer. This is pre the internet. When I qualified in '97, just as the internet was sort of kicking in, and I was a VC lawyer, and all the deals I saw were management buyouts. These are people that they never expected to be entrepreneurs or own businesses. They just became very good at what they do. They were the CEO of a reasonably big company, turning over 50 to 100 million pounds. The owner had given up or wanted to retire, or they just wanted to buy the boss out because they could do a better job. And they raised the money from the VCs. They put the house up for, they remortgaged the house, put a lot of money themselves, and bought it out. It's called a management buyout.
Mm.
Or you went to saw a company, you did a buy-in, so you place the management. So that was the deals I sort of grew up with when I was training. And now it's quite different. You tend to put a lot of money in people these days. So I forgot the question now. What was the question?
The question was successful characteristics.
So the point is that the point is they kind of became entrepreneurs. That question about, is it something you learn or something you're born with? So they never expected to be entrepreneurs, but they became entrepreneurs. A lot of the big companies you saw in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s were these people that grew these businesses. There weren't that many people, maybe these Alan Sugars, 16 years old, started selling car aerials and built a business. Now it's quite different, where people are more willing, I think, innately to take risks. I think people recognise that, they say that being an entrepreneur is like the new rock star. I take risks because, being an entrepreneur starting a business is flipping hard work, and you miss out on a lot of things, you give up on a lot of things. It's a life changing decision. But I think increasingly people realise, the younger generation there, it's a career option because there's no such thing anymore as this job you have for life. My dad probably worked for 3 companies, or working career. One worked in NHS, he worked for one, then she actually worked for herself after that. That's kind of gone. So I think it's someone who willing to take risk. It's someone that they're determined because it's a long, long, hard road. And I think after that you can dance around it. But I think that it's a real smorgasbord of people. I've met entrepreneurs that when I talk to them, they couldn't. I think you couldn't run a bath, but
Yeah.
they've got a massive company because they're just good at selling. They're good at one thing,
Yeah.
and they've been good at it, and that's what they do. And everyone else around them just supports them to make that happen, and they're amazing at it. They're awful people managers, but they're multi millionaires. These big businesses, but people might call them a-holes, but they're super good at what they do, and you can't take it away from them. Then you've got some people who are, you sort of your Steve Jobs type, sort of geniuses, And you've got the ones that are your professionals that became entrepreneurs, like your management buyout lot. And you've got those that's all they've ever wanted to do. And people that are sort of the next generation, really, where that's a career option. It was always, I'm going to go to university and I'm going to start a business. And that's it.
Yeah.
And then it'll be the third one that works.
Right, last couple of questions. Got a bunch here still, so we'll finish up with these guys. Thank you very much indeed. Eloise asks, I have my full-time work and I want to learn how to start up to give more back on a bigger scale outside of that. One of your courses is about Are You Ready? Would you say something about what ready actually looks like to help me?
So I think in that module now, I talk about everything from your sort of financial readiness, your mental health, which is, believe it or not, it has to be quite important. So it's your finances, your mental health, your physical well-being, because it can suck a lot out of you. If you're working all hours, you probably are not getting that running you wanted to, or going to the gym, or you wanted to get into shape, and now you're not going to have the time really. So a lot of it's about discipline. Can you come up with a structure for your day that lets you fit in the other things you need to do to stay healthy? Because unless you've got a healthy body and a healthy mind, and I've done it myself, where I've been working so hard that you forget for a month. You've been eating stuff that comes out of packets, and then you say you haven't slept and you haven't worked out, you haven't got on a bike, and 2 months have passed. So I was thinking about ready. It's not really about the business and the research. That was kind of a slightly different module. It was more about, are you just ready physically, mentally, and even financially start a business. Because what you don't want to do is trying to start a business if you're putting your last pound, your last dollar into it, or if you're in a difficult relationship situation or whatever it might be. It can be very personal. So just think about, is the time right? You don't have to start a business today. Very few businesses, unless you can get some real busy technology that's in a very hot space, you need to start today. You can start them tomorrow and get your sort of get your ducks in a row.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that, Eloise. Maybe the last question we've got then is going to be Jonathan. Talking of apps, any do's or don'ts for an MVP? I guess you haven't done one that long ago, I suppose, Piers, or a couple, in fact.
I'm looking at one now, I suppose. I've done a few, but again, MVP is one of those terms, isn't it? The MVP, you think about something that's held together with sellotape, and a bit of sort of old string and a cornflakes packet. I think, consumers, B2B or B2C these days, they're a bit wiser than that. So you want something which an MVP is respectable. There's that, I don't know who said it, that if you're proud of your MVP, you launched it too late. So that to some extent is true. But, I can see it talking about you got to go lean, you got to go agile, get an MVP, and then, it's about learn, test, build. Yeah, that's right. But you've got to look at your business, your customers. What kind of S? I mean, I'm in B2B, right? So the stuff I'm looking at, it's got 99.999% SLA. So an MVP that is up 1 hour a day, it ain't going to cut it. So you've got to think about that. Is it a prototype? But if you haven't got huge resources, number one is, let me start again actually. Whether you have huge resources or not, increasingly, technology, the ability to leverage other people's infrastructure, be that logistics or cloud-based servers, whatever it might be, even talent on platforms like Fiverr, whatever it might be, is you can now access a lot of the inputs into creativity as variable costs. What that means is that you can test your product, your service, your prototype a lot more than you used to be able to. You used to be able to have to go build everything with bricks. If it didn't work, you had to go and walk away. Whereas now, just try and leverage all those things that are out there, test it as far as you can. But when you come to launch it, make sure you understand what it is your customers are actually expecting, because some half-baked MVP doesn't always cut it. But the concept, though, of making it as good as you possibly can with the resources you've got that delivers. So the equation is you've got to try and deliver the most value you can to that target customer with the resources you've got. Think of it like that.
Perfecto. Okay, well, thank you very much, Eloise. Says awesome answer, really helpful. Thank you. Thank you for your time, very valuable. Another great discussion. The honest, transparent, and informality is great. Thanks. You are all very welcome. So coming up to 5 o'clock now, folks. So as I said earlier, you can win a mentoring session with Piers by simply having registered for this. We also posted up, as we started the discussion, Piers' course. I've got the link there. I'll leave it the last thing. So scaleyourstartup.co.uk and you will get a huge discount on 10 and a half hours of Piers.
I was also about to selling it, but I'm actually quite proud of it. I think it gets good feedback, and it's like doing this, but in a much more pointed way with much more structure.
Yeah, you need the structure on a course.
You get 10.5 hours of it. So my advice is, whether you get it from me or you get it from somewhere else, is seek advice, and ideally seek it from someone that's got the t-shirt, because you'll get advice that's got much more context and is much more relevant.
Absolutely. Rather than trying to battle away on your own as well, or just searching the internet for advice. So, look, thank you once again. Much appreciate your time. I know you've had a crazy busy day.
Tomorrow, the Festival of Startups.
got last session with William Watkins, founder of Radnor Drinks, at 6 o'clock, and then we've got a bonus day tomorrow where we've got Adam Kamani. I'm interviewing from co-founded Pretty Little Thing and Boohoo Dynasty, etc. To round up tomorrow. So yeah,
Great.
Up near your neck of the woods, Manchester.
Been a good event, isn't it?
It has. Yeah, really appreciate you taking the time out. We're going to reveal some future plans very soon with everybody to roll this out on a regular basis, because even though we had Boris's news about events, as Piers said earlier, we still can't really plan because we don't know how that's going to go, what it's going to look like.
But sorry, just butt in, but what a testament to entrepreneurial flair and pivoting the festival.
Yeah.
I mean, oh my God. I mean, the only business is probably worse for you is run nightclubs, and they've managed to turn it into this. Fair play to the boys.
Indeed, yeah. Big pivot. One of the most used words of this year, but this has been a huge one. Live event to 35 session 2-week event. So thank you everybody who's made this possible, including Piers, and. Ross put, what happened to Ollie Whittle? So Ollie Whittle is also a bonus session tomorrow because he's the only person, bless him, a good friend of mine, who failed to get on and deliver yesterday. But it wasn't. He got on in the pre-launch, and we were chatting in the virtual green room, and then he pressed to go to his slide, and it all went wrong, and he couldn't get back in the room.
Well, Alex, good to see you. Stay safe, everyone. Bye now.
Cheerio now. Bye bye.